What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope everybody out there is having an awesome day. It's finally dry enough to get some more warm seeds and stuff planted around here, although it is extremely windy, very gusty today, so I apologize in advance for that. But today we're going to try to get some pumpkins planted, and hopefully we can get 3 rows of these guys planted, and if we have time in the video, I want to show you how our onions are doing. So we've got our pumpkin plot ready. I kind of strip tilled where our 3 rows are going to go here. No need to till the whole plot there. It's pretty clean. I just wanted to soften up that area where we're going to be making a furrow and putting our drip tape. And we've got a beautiful tray of pumpkin transplants here. Several different varieties we're going to be planting today. Some blue pumpkins, some fairy tale pumpkins, and some giant pumpkins. So before we plant these guys, let's talk about pumpkins a little bit, because we've had a lot of people asking us questions on social media lately about planting pumpkins. Where can I grow pumpkins? What different varieties of pumpkins I could plant, all that good stuff. Now, let's start off with transplant versus direct seed. We always transplant our pumpkins in the spring just because it gives us a little bit of a head start. We can germinate those seeds in the greenhouse in a controlled environment and then put these nice looking plants in the ground. You can just as easily direct seed pumpkins, but I probably wouldn't put those seeds in the ground right now because it's still a little cool at night. I'd wait till it warmed up a little bit so I get better germination. So this gives us a little head start, because once summer sets in, disease and insect pests will be pretty bad on these guys, and we want to give them a little head start. That way we can get a nice crop before all that disease and pest pressure gets really heavy. So if you've got a seed starting setup or you've got a greenhouse, you may consider transplanting. If you don't have any of that, you can direct seed them and they'll do just fine. Just wait till the soil warms up really nice in spring there. Now, if you are going to transplant these, just know that these grow out really fast in the trays. I think when we started these, I told you about 4 weeks, but seems like these are closer to 3 weeks old. So they grow out really, really fast. So you need to be prepared. If you plant these in seed starting trays, it's not going to be long before you're going to need to put them in the ground. Now lately we've had a lot of people asking about, can you grow pumpkins in containers or raised beds? Now around here we'll plant them in the ground in this plot I showed you earlier, and we usually give them a decent amount of space between rows, 8 to 10 feet, although you can give them more space than that. These plants get huge, they crawl all over the place, and the different varieties that we plant will be kind of intertwining amongst one another in this plot once everything gets grown up. So yes, you can plant these in a pot, a container, a raised bed. Just be prepared for them to crawl all over the ground around that container or raised bed. You plant the main stem in the container, the plants are going to crawl all over the place, and your pumpkins are probably going to be on the ground and not in the container. But as long as you prepare for that and have plenty of room around your container, sure, you can plant this puppy right here in a pot and just let it crawl all over the place. So now let's talk a little bit about the different types of pumpkins you can grow, because we'll be planting several different types, several different species today. And this is going to be important if you're worried about saving seeds. You don't want cross-pollination between the same species if you want those seeds to be true to variety. If you're not worried about saving the seeds, this is not going to be a huge issue. So there's 4 species of pumpkin / winter squash that we can grow, and I'm actually going to stop using the term winter squash. I think I'm just going to call them all pumpkins. We had a subscriber a while back say that here in the US we're the only people that makes a distinction between winter squash and pumpkins. Everywhere else they just call them all pumpkins. So I think that's what I'll do. We just call them all pumpkins. Probably not going to use the term winter squash anymore. But anyway, so we have 4 species. We have Cucurbita machata, Cucurbita maxima, Cucurbita pepo, and Cucurbita mixta. So we'll just say C instead of saying Cucurbita each time. So let's start off with the Cucurbita machata. This is things like butternut squash, Cherokee tan pumpkin, Seminole pumpkin, and this fairy tale pumpkin that we'll be planting today. These tend to have a tan exterior. They store for a really, really long time. They're pretty good to eat. They also sometimes have some kind of built-in pest resistance, like in the case of the Seminole pumpkin or the Cherokee tan pumpkin. So sometimes these are better to grow in the fall when your pest and disease pressure is a little higher, because they tend to be a little more tolerant to it. And then we have C. maxima, which includes things like your kabocha squash. It also includes many of the giant pumpkin varieties out there. Now the C. maxima types are a little bit sweeter than the C. machata types, but they don't store quite as long. They still store pretty well, but just not as long as some of those C. machata types. We always like to grow at least one C. maxima variety because they taste so good, and even though they don't store as long, we usually are able to eat them up before they go bad. And then you have C. pepo, which is your jack-o'-lantern type pumpkins, the ones that are really designed to be eaten. C. pepo also includes summer squash, but that's not relative to this conversation. So C. pepo is your jack-o'-lanterns, and we usually don't grow a lot of those in the spring. We may try to grow some more of those in the fall months, but we're not really growing those to eat. Those are more grown for kind of decorative or ornamental purposes. And then the last one, the lesser known of the four, would be the C. mixta, which is cushaw squash. And cushaw squash are really fun to grow. They can get really, really big if you feed them right, and they tend to store really, really well. We grew some cushaw squash last year. They did well for us. We're not growing any this year, but they're a great thing to have in your garden. So as I told you earlier, today we're planting 3 rows. The first row is going to get the Jade Night pumpkin, which is a C. maxima type, makes a blue pumpkin. This is a kabocha type. It's supposed to taste really good. It also has some nice disease resistance because it's a hybrid. Never grown that one before, so we're looking forward to that. And then we've got our C. machata representative, which is the fairy tale pumpkin, also known by its official name, Muscat de Provence. And that one is going to be our storage pumpkin. That one will store well into the winter. It's a really good tasting pumpkin. I've never grown it personally, but I've eaten them, and they're really pretty and they're really good to eat, so looking forward to that one. And then we've got several giant pumpkin types that were sent to us by the fine folks at Heavenly Hills Homestead. I'll put a link to their channel below. They grow a lot of big giant pumpkins, and these are the C. maxima species. So we're going to plant several plants of those. These things are supposed to get several hundred pounds or larger. Should be fun to see how big a one we can grow. So the first thing we need to do is get some furrows made where I've tilled here, get some drip tape laid in those furrows along with some pre-plant fertilizer. Now I didn't measure out this row spacing here. I just tried to get it as close to equal as I could. I think I got pretty close there. Now we've got one line of drip tape there we can reuse, but we'll have to put down 2 new lines, and we're going to be putting some 1300 in the furrow just like we did that tomato plot over there, because our soil test told us that this plot was pretty good on potassium and phosphorus. Alright, so we got our irrigation lines in, got those turned on and dripping. I thought I was going to have to lay 2 new lines, but then I looked over here and realized I had some drip lines I could use from where I pulled up some stuff in this plot. So I just stole a couple lines from over there, put them right here, kept us from having to use or lay any more new drip tape. And we'll mention over here, we're a little short on room on this end because we have some stuff growing here, but these rutabagas are pretty much ready to harvest anytime now. This celery here looks all right, but if it gets overtaken by the pumpkins, it won't hurt my feelings much. I didn't have much high hopes for it, but we'll just see what happens there. Maybe it'll be done by the time the pumpkins get over there. The rutabagas, we'll get those in the next week or so. And we've got some pretty nice soil here. So this is a plot where we added several tons of compost, but we tilled it into the soil. It's nice and fluffy, a lot better than it was before we added that compost. So we're gonna start off with this Jade Night pumpkin here. There's an emitter right there, and I'm going to plant these a little deep because they're a little leggy, and we got this wind blowing today, kind of bad. I don't want them to break. And we're going to plant these about 2 feet apart along the row here. So we got one there, there's an emitter. We'll skip over and plant one by this emitter right here. Tuck those in. And in the past I would cover this tape and then plant on top of the covered tape, but recently I've been liking just skipping the covering step and just covering it as I go along. Seems to make it a lot quicker, and I don't have to worry about coming in here and covering it because I'm going to be covering it as I go along anyway. And we'll do the same thing with these fairy tale pumpkins on the second row. Put a plant every 2 feet, plant them a little deep there, and you can go further apart. along the row with these if you want to, but we give them plenty of space, or a decent amount of space on either side of the row, so hopefully they grow out this way a little bit more, and we can come in here and train the vines, kind of tuck them back in if we need to. So 2 foot along the rows always worked well for me. Now on these giant pumpkins here, I'm gonna give them a little more space. I think I may do 4 foot spacing on those. And I've got several variants here, and if I had the space I would plant the variants in different spots, but I don't. So we're just gonna put a few of each variant that we were sent here along the row. And we're gonna give these a little more room, because supposedly these things grow really, really fast and get really, really big. All right, so we got them all in there. A row of Jade Knight, a row of Fairy Tale, and the giant pumpkins on the end there. Now these things will inevitably try to crawl out of this plot, and when they do, they'll get clipped with a lawnmower, just kind of get pruned. Won't hurt anything. Just hopefully concentrate more energy into the plants or the vines that are actually in the plot there. And so once these things start growing, it won't take long before this entire plot just looks like a jungle. If it looks anything like our pumpkin plot last year, it's just completely covered with pumpkin vines, which is what we like to see, because that way we don't really have to worry about any weeds popping up in there. We get some good weed suppression just by having a thick, dense layer of vegetation there. And that's one big reason why drip irrigation is so important on pumpkins. So once these things do form that thick canopy of vegetation there, if we're trying to get water down to the soil via an overhead sprinkler, not only are we going to waste a lot of water, but we're going to be putting a lot of water on those leaves, which will be inviting a lot of disease issues, powdery mildew, downy mildew, things like that. But with the drip irrigation, we can feed those plants right at the soil there. We're not wasting a lot of water, and we're not creating a lot of leaf moisture that would be unnecessary. And according to the folks at Heavenly Hills Homestead, these giant pumpkins are pretty heavy feeders. They like to be fed regularly and need a decent amount of fertilizer to get to their full potential. So I assume as we're injecting stuff through the drip system, some of these other rows will get fed pretty heavily as well. We'll see if that makes a big difference on production or not. So we're just growing the giant pumpkins for fun. We'll see what happens. We'll see how big a one we can grow. There's a lot of techniques there, and I'm not sure I can follow them all to a T. If you want to see how it's really done, go check out Heavenly Hills Homestead. They grow some massive ones over there. They hand pollinate, do all these different things to make sure they get some massive pumpkins. I don't know that we're going to be able to do all those things. We're going to try to, follow the best practices for growing giant pumpkins, but we'll just see what we get, and it'll be fun for the kids and us anyways. All right, so pumpkins are planted, and that's one more thing to check off the warm season planting to-do list. Now let's take a look at these onions, because I'm getting pretty excited about what I'm seeing on some of these. So we've got about 7 or 8 different varieties of short day onions here that look pretty pitiful several months ago, but they've turned the corner and they're looking really, really good now. Got a lot of vegetation out there, and I couldn't find my list earlier on which variety is which, but we'll take a look at them. And I know a few of these rows are. We'll take a look and see how they're coming along. These on the end here are bunching onions, so we're not going to include those. We're going to include these bulbing onions here, the 7 or 8 rows that you see. So let's start off here with these red onions, and we can see some of the necks on these here are pretty thick. That one there is about the size of a $50, and some of these other ones in here are too. Hard to tell what we got as far as the bulb goes down there, but I think it'd be a fine time to check. Now some people will do this as a part of their onion growing strategy. They swear by ringing the onions or removing the soil from around the base of the onion there, and that supposedly is going to make the onion be able to make a bigger bulb. I think that really only makes a difference in harder soils, clay soils. Doesn't seem to really make a big difference in these soils here, especially this soil, which is just pretty much all compost. We have a little bit of a bulb forming there. Nothing as big as what we'll see on some of the yellow onions in a minute. So still a ways to go on that guy. But if we look at some of these sweet onions here, we can see we got some nice bulbing going on here. That's a pretty good size onion right there. This plant's not showing any signs of dying back anytime soon, so I presume that will just get bigger and bigger. Hopefully we'll have a nice softball size onion there before all is said and done. So we probably still got at least another month or so before these things start falling over and get ready to harvest. Now this one right here has fallen over, but that's the wind's fault. But that's another nice size onion right there forming in this row. And there's another nice one right there, kind of showing itself on the end of this row. There's a smaller one there. They probably won't all get softball size because we planted them in here pretty thick and I didn't thin them out like I should. But as long as we get several that are nice big ones like that, I'll be happy. There's two right there right beside each other. Man, those are some good looking onions. And I told you just a minute ago that I didn't have my planting map of varieties, and then I just remembered it was on my phone. So I took a look at it, and the two best looking varieties we have so far, the ones with those big onions I just showed you, are the DP Sweet and the Sapelo Sweet. Now, I think Sapelo Sweet is the same thing as Savannah Sweet, although I don't have any way to prove that. But those are the best two looking varieties so far. Now, that doesn't mean they'll be the biggest varieties in the end, because some varieties are earlier to mature than others. These others could just be, you know, later maturing varieties, maybe just need more time. But so far, leaders in the clubhouse would be DP Sweet and Sapelo Sweet. And so this was our first time growing no-till onions, but also our first time growing onions organically. We didn't use any synthetic fertilizer on these. We just used organic fertilizer. Now, we did feed them pretty heavily. So we put 855 in the planting furrow. We side dressed them twice with 1300, the Nature Safe 1300. We also ran some AgriThrive a couple times through the overhead sprinkler, injected it through the overhead sprinkler, and we put a decent amount of alfalfa pellets down. So we put a whole smorgasbord of fertilizer to these, and it looks like it has worked so far. Now, that's probably not any more fertilizer than I would use if I was doing, you know, synthetics, probably about the same rate. But it's good to know that we can get those organic fertilizers to convert in the cooler months when we're growing these onions, get them to convert so they can actually feed these plants. So now hopefully we know, yes, we can still get big bulbs of onions using organic and not synthetic fertilizers. And we also know that the no-till system here has significantly reduced any onion diseases. I haven't seen really any signs of any blight or any diseases on these, and I can only attribute that to the soil biology we have in this no-till system here. So I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on our onions as those bulbs get bigger and bigger. Like I said, hoping for some big softball sized onions there. Still got a little time before they start dying back and falling over. And when it comes harvest time, then we'll be able to evaluate all these different varieties that we trialed and pick our winners and losers if there are any. Now, I know a lot of you in the middle of the country or in the northern part of the country have just planted onions, or you're getting ready to plant onions. But if you're in the south and have some short day onions growing right now, let me know how they're doing. If you're comparing some varieties like we are, let me know which varieties appear to be in the lead. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Good to get those pumpkins planted. Good to see some progress on our onions there. Coming up next, we'll probably be getting our cucumbers in the ground. We got transplants that are ready. Be direct seeding some squash. Probably doing a little more harvesting. Lots of good things coming up in future videos. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to check out our affiliate links below. Lots of great companies that we use in our gardens around here at Lazy Dog Farm. Also, go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com, where we've got recipes, our garden blog, recommended products, and some cool Lazy Dog Farm merch. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification button, like, and share, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.